Hello everyone, my name is Scalti, and today we're going to be going over a factory that creates 10 modular frames per minute at 100% efficiency. I hope you enjoy. Alright, so before we get the build started, let's go over what we're going to need for the factory. On the right you can see our list. We're going to need 8 smelters, 17 constructors, and 8 assemblers. And regarding our miners, this will be highly dependent on the area in which you're building this. So in our example here, we have 2 Mark I miners on 2 pure iron nodes. And at the point in which this factory is relevant, if we're building from, start to finish through the tiers, you likely will not have access to the Mark III belts. If you do, you can actually use a single pure iron node with a Mark I miner overclocked to 200%, the Mark III belt coming off of it. Or if you have access to the Mark II miner, you don't even need to do any overclocking. At the end of the day, you just want to make sure you have 240 iron ore coming into the system. Additionally, the power draw for our factory will be at least 247 megawatts, given the example that we'll be using here. And the space that we'll need for the factory will be a 5x9 area, and the white and green foundations in the middle denote the footprint of the actual building, and that is 7x3. And the green foundations specifically reference where we're going to be putting our smelters. So before we get any of that started, we want to go ahead and get our walls in place before we do any kind of belt work. So on these green foundations, we'll do our single wall conveyors. And then the remaining areas will just be our normal walls. Okay, and now we just gotta have to do some simple load balancing. So between each of these walls here, we're going to go ahead and place a splitter right up against the wall on both sides. And then in order to get a nice 90-degree bend, essentially place the splitter as if we're placing it in front of or next to the splitter, but just bring it over here to the white foundation in the middle. And that way you get a nice 90-degree straight belt bend. Go ahead and do the other side now. And then going into the splitters, we want our Mark II belts coming off of the Mark II lifts. Pretty simple load balancing. And now we can go ahead and just get all of this hidden away with our 8x1 foundations. And then we'll place our smelters on top where the wall conveyors are. And when we place our smelters, you want these hanging off by just a little bit. This way when we connect our lifts to the bottom, it will snap nice and clean with no additional belt work necessary. Just like that. So now that we have our smelters in place, we're going to do some load balancing here based on what the iron ingots are going to be used for later on in the factory. So we're going to need 105 iron rods and 90 iron plates, which means for the iron plates, we're going to need 135 iron ingots, and then for the rods, 105. So in order to divvy this up appropriately, what I'm going to go ahead and do is get this all set up, and then I'm going to do another top-down view to better explain this if necessary after we get this all set up. So I'm going to refer to this side as the back, where we have our iron ore coming into the system, and that makes this side the front. So here on these back four smelters, what we're going to do is we need to take the 120 iron ingots that this is going to be producing and essentially take 15 out of it. Thankfully, because these make 30 iron ingots each, it's pretty easy to just take 15 or take one smelter and split that 30 in half, and getting us 15 iron ingots on one side and 15 on the other. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a merger on this back right, so back right, the back right smelter, and we're going to face this directly out from it, and then we're going to take one on the opposite side and face it off toward the back, running this way. And then over here, we're going to take a splitter facing away from it. Make sure this is, there we go. And so essentially this is going to be the smelter that we're dividing. So we're going to have 15 iron ingots going in this direction and then 15 iron ingots going in this direction. Now, we have 135 iron ingots going off in this direction for our iron plates, but because we're using Mark II belts, we need to ensure that we're not bottlenecking, since we can only transport 120 items per minute on those belts. So what we're going to do on these front left two smelters is just merge these together into their own line, going off in the direction toward the front. And then same thing here on the opposite, we're going to be placing a merger in front of both of these, so that way the 15 coming from over here can connect. So let's go ahead and get this belted up. Go ahead and get our 90 degrees all set up. So we have 15 coming over in this direction, merging with our 30 from here. So we can go ahead and use a Mark I belt here. Mark I's coming out of the smelters. And then over here, we're going to be doing the 15 plus 30 is 45, plus additional 30 is 75. So we need to use a Mark II belt here as well. And this will be coming off to the very edge. And then same thing over here, but we can just use a Mark I belt. It's totally fine. Like so. Then we'll come back over here. So from the splitter, we got the 15 iron ingots going over here. And then got essentially 30 here, 60 here, and then the merger off of this smelter will come over to here. So now we have 15, 30 plus 60 gives us our 105 coming out of this merger here. Go ahead and use a Mark II belt. Bring that off to the edge. Like so. I'm going to go ahead and get that top-down view. And so, just to quickly recap, on the top right, we have two smelters being merged together for 60. The bottom right two. The left one is being split into two lines of 15. The 15 is merging with the left 4, giving us 120 plus 15 for 135. And then the remaining iron ingots are going off to the right at 105. So with that, let's go ahead and get our second floor started. So what we're going to want to do is take an 8x4 foundation, build that up 4 times. This is where we're going to be building our first sandwich layer. If you're not familiar with that, essentially it's going to be used to hide away all of our belt work between floors. So we take our 8x4 foundations, build that up 4 times, take 4 8x1s to match the height of the 8x4, and then we delete the middle 2 and the 8x4 foundations that we previously built. Now we have our top layer of the sandwich and the bottom layer of our sandwich. And we want to build this out to the 7x3 space that we have down below. And when you build these sandwich layers, you want to make sure that you build both the top and bottom before we do any kind of belt work. Reason being, if you just do the bottom layer and you put in any of the splitters, you will end up having a clearance issue. As you can see here, the top has some clipping with the splitter, And so as a result, you wouldn't be able to place the top foundation. So for this next floor up, we're going to be doing our iron rods and our iron plates. And so the iron plates will require 5 constructors, and so we're going to put those on this edge here. And then on the other edge, we're going to be taking up every single foundation to put constructors in for the iron rods. But before we place those constructors, we want to get our walls in place, so that way it's a lot easier in the long run. So over here, we're just going to do a normal wall. And then these 5 middle ones, we'll do our wall conveyors. Normal wall on the edge here. And then where we have our 1 belt coming up, we'll just do a simple single wall conveyor, normal wall. And then over here, we'll do all... Oops. All of those will be our wall conveyors over there. And then we have 2 lines coming up over here. So we'll do normal wall, and then a wall conveyor with 2 holes in it. And we're going to leave this open so we can do our belt work. But before we do that, we want to go ahead and get our constructors in place. So similar with the smelters below, we want these hanging off just by a little bit. So as you can see here, little pads are just kind of chilling. Go ahead and get the rest of these in place. Just like that. Now let's go ahead and bring up our iron ingots from below. Using Mark II lift for the iron rods. And then on this side here, this is our Mark II belt, and this is our Mark I. So we can do Mark I for the Mark I, and the Mark II for the Mark II. Now, based on how all of this is kind of going to be playing out, we're not going to really focus on any load balancing here. What we're going to do is use an overflow method. So the iron rods we'll start with first. Reason being, as you can see, this is a pretty tight space vertically. We don't have much room to work with. So what we want to do is build our way out. So by having our exit being located here, we want to go ahead and get all of this taken care of first. So in front of all of these, let's go ahead and put a splitter, except for the last one. We don't need to worry about that one. And when placing our splitters here, you want to make sure that these are no further to the edge than in the middle here. Otherwise, you will not be able to build your belt. It'll give you an invalid shape. Then we'll go ahead and switch our input on the splitter to better face our input coming up. Let's go ahead and take our Mark II belt, put that into here. Mark I, Mark I. On all of these splitters coming off. On the edge here. And then I would recommend using Mark II belts in between here. Especially on the first few, since we have the 105 coming up, and then you got 90, 75, and then finally 60 here. So you could potentially get away with some Mark I belts after this. I just recommend just go ahead and do Mark II just to ensure that everything's going to run smoothly. So we have our iron rods sorted out with those 7 there, and so we have our iron plates here, and each of these is going to require 30 iron ingots coming in. And we're not going to actually have 100, so if we take, we're not going to have 150 coming up into these here, so it'd be 30, 60, 90, 120, and 150. We only need 90 iron plates, so one of these is going to be operating at 50% efficiency. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our 60, which is our Mark I down here. So we have our 60 coming up into this lift here. What we're going to do is we're going to actually run this all the way down to these 2 on the end here. Let's go ahead and take a splitter, and I'm going to kind of eyeball it. It might not be perfect, but just want to place it in the middle of these lifts here, and just take Mark I belts coming off like so. Then we'll go ahead and get that in place. I think that... Nice. I love the 90-degree turns. All right, so for this one here, we're just going to do the overflow system. So we're just going to take our splitters with the input facing the iron ingots coming up, like so. And then just split this out here. Do some Mark 1 belts. Use a Mark 2 in between. Then another Mark 1. And then our Mark 2 coming up. So this is why we did our iron rods first. We're building our way out, so that way the last belt we place is not going to be between us and our exit here. So that way we can just leave. Easy peasy. Get this closed up. And then the top here, really simple. So we have, at this point, 90 iron plates being made here. And then over here we have 105 iron rods. So we can just now do simple Mark II belting. And we don't need to worry about any kind of additional, two lines going off in one direction. So what we're going to do is take our iron rods and feed them off to the back edge. And then we're going to take our iron plates and feed them off to the front. So to do that, let's go ahead and take some mergers and have these facing toward the front. These all connected. So we have 20, 20, and then potentially 20. This will end up being the 50% efficiency one. So we can technically, if you want, do a Mark 1 belt here. I'm just going to do a Mark 2, play it safe. Mark 2. And then Mark 2 coming off to the edge here. I'm going to go ahead and hold off on placing this one since we're going to have some belt work going on over here. I want to make sure we're not clipping. So we're going to go ahead and run our rods off into the other direction. So we'll flip our mergers around and go off this way. All right, I thought I messed up there for a second, but we're good. So we have our iron rods coming off in this direction. Let's go ahead and get these all merged up. See, we got 15, 30, 45, 60. We can technically use a Mark 1 belt here. And then we do Mark 2 the rest of the way. Like so. And so the reason why I thought I messed up, just to kind of provide some context, is this is not centered. And so if we were to bring just this one line up to the next floor, we'd have to use a 2-wall conveyor or 2-hole wall conveyor. But based on how the next floor is going to be built, which you'll see here in a moment, we're totally fine. So that is our first constructor floor. Oh, let's go ahead and bring off the Mark II belts like so. And there's actually no conflict, which is great. Could have just built it outright. So with that, let's go ahead and get started on our next floor. And this time around, we're just going to take an 8x4 foundation and build it up 3 times instead of 4 to get our vertical clearance over our constructors here and get our next sandwich layer constructed. Just like that. And similar to what we did for our iron plates, we only need 5 constructors for our screws. We're going to be making 180 of them. So we're going to take these 5 foundations on the left side, or where we have our 7 down below. So we'll take our single wall conveyors and build 5 of those here. And we'll do normal wall over here. And then on this side, so we have our iron rods coming up. So we're going to do a 2-wall conveyor here. And reason being is you're going to have our rods coming up into this hole here. And these will be going off. We'll do an overflow system for these 5 here. And then at the very end, we're going to take another belt and bring it all the way back down to be an output from this wall here going up to our top floor for the construction of our modular frames. So let's go ahead and get the rest of the walls in place. Okay, we'll leave this one open for our belt work. And then we'll get our constructors in place. We'll go ahead and get everything belted up. So we need splitters in front of each of these. And this one here, we have our 60 coming off. And before we connect this all the way down to the end, we're going to wait until we get that lift in place, but that's not going to happen for a little while now. So we'll go ahead and get these all connected together. Oops. Need to make sure that we actually are bringing these up from down below first. There we go, just like that. Let's go ahead and get this all sorted out. So we have 180 screws being produced. And so what we're going to do is split these up into two different lines of 90. And this will be very helpful for our load balancing for the assemblers to make our reinforced iron plates on the next floor. So in this middle constructor here, I'm going to go ahead and place a splitter facing directly out from it. Like so. And so we'll have 40 coming out, and this will be breaking out into two lines of 20. Mixing in with our 80 from here, 80 from here. Well, actually, I'm sorry. So one of these will be operating at 50% because we only need 180 screws. So 5 times what would be normally 40 is 200, but we only need the 180. So one of these is going to be at 50%. Ultimately, after the load balancing sorts itself out, this will essentially be two different lines of 90. So on the front two constructors here, we want the mergers to be as close as possible. So these are the front two. This is the front here. And then on the back two, we're just going to take one merger and put it out over here, and another merger in front of that splitter, so that we will have two belts coming out that'll match the width of the two wall conveyor down below. Just get this belted up. Make sure you put a belt here connecting these out. Bring this all the way to the edge. Just like that. And again, just going to take 3 8x4 foundations to build our next sandwich layer. Okay. And so here we're going to be using 3 assemblers to create our reinforced iron plates. Each assembler will create 5 per minute. And so because of their increased size compared to the constructors, what we're going to be doing is on the long edge, we're going to take 3 of these and use the middle one, and then every other, so the second and, well, second, fourth, and fifth. I can't math. Second, fourth, and sixth. Jeez. Before we get those in place, we want to make sure that we get our walls. So we're going to do 2 wall conveyor, normal wall, 2 wall conveyor, normal wall, and then another 2 wall conveyor. And then over here on the front short edge, so we have our screws on either side here, and then we have our 90 iron plates coming up from our second floor. So here, we're going to want to do a 3 wall conveyor. Sorry. I always say 3 wall conveyor, but it's not 3 walls, it's just 1 wall conveyor with 3 conveyor holes in it. I don't know the better way to say it. Anyway, I'm rambling. All right, so we get normal walls. We'll leave this one open for our belt work, and then every other wall on here will be a normal wall. Get our assemblers in place now. And again, just hanging off by just a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and do some regular Mark 1 lifts for all of these. Like so. Now here's where things are definitely going to get a little spaghetti. So let me get these lifts in place here real quick. So we can load balance the screws. We can't, well, technically we can load balance everything. So we have the 90 iron plates coming up from the middle, and then we have 90 screws on either side. And so what we need to do is have 30 iron plates going to each of the assemblers, and then we need 60 screws going to each of the assemblers as well. So for the screws, first, this is kind of going to be tricky with building our way out. So we have our, we'll call this for the moment the back. So this will be the front, this will be the back. So we have our back 90 screws coming up here. So this will be essentially coming all the way down over to here. So we need to take the 90 from here and split this up, so that way we're going to essentially have, with the overflow system sorted out, we're going to be divvying it up so that way we're going to have our screws going off in this direction, and then what we're going to do here is put a merger facing toward the assembler, and then another splitter here. And so essentially we're going to have the 90 on the front side come into here and then split into this lift here. And then the remaining will go to this merger here and then go into the assembler. And then again, the we'll bring the 90 all the way down to the long edge here. And bring it in like that. And then before we actually get this belt in place, well, we'll just go ahead and do it like this. We're going to have to deconstruct something to get out of here, but so we have our 90 screws coming the long edge here, 90 on the short side, like so. Oh, Mark II belt. Make sure this is a Mark II as well. There we go. And then the iron plates coming up, we're going to divide these. So we're going to go ahead and put a splitter pretty much here. So the output on the splitter is going to line up with this lift here. And we'll take the far edge and bring it over to here. Get this one connected up for our screws. And then we have the other iron plates coming out in this direction. And then this will connect the Mark II into the center lift coming out. So I hope that makes sense. Essentially, for the screws, the middle assembler gets a merger. The two side assemblers get a splitter, and those splitters split into the assembler and then into that merger. And then the iron plates coming up just simply get split up 3 ways into the assemblers. Let's go ahead and leave the layer. So we now have our reinforced iron plates ready to go. And we're ready to start on our final floor. So here's simple enough. We have 15 reinforced iron plates coming up into our next floor. And again, we have our 60 rods coming up from our third floor here. So what we're going to do is merge these together, leading off to the back side. Okay, that did go in. And bring this off. So based on us having the iron rods coming up on the left here, what we want to do is bring our belt over to where it lines up on the right. Like so. Let's go ahead and get our Next sandwich layer completed. And here for the assemblers, interestingly enough, you only need to build up your 8x4 foundations 3 times and then get the sandwich layer started. So you can clearly see that there is a little bit of clipping in here, but not to worry, nothing to really get in the way, and you can't really tell from this floor down here looking up at it. So we have our 60 rods coming up over here and our 15 reinforced iron plates coming up here. So let's go ahead and get our 2 wall conveyor in place here. And bring our lifts up finally. So we actually have 60, so we only really need a Mark 1 lift here. And same thing here. And then for this, we're going to need 5 assemblers. The modular frames are 2 per minute from the assemblers. And those will be going essentially on the short edge corners here, like so. And then we're going to have 1 in the middle, like this. So let's go ahead and get our walls in place. Two wall conveyors on the short side. Leave one open to do our belt work. Get the assemblers in place. Just like that. Now when it comes to the belt work for this layer, it's going to be as ridiculous as what we did for the screws and iron plates down below. So we're essentially taking one input and we're going to do an overflow into 5 separate inputs. Trying to load balance that in here would be more complicated than it really needs to be. So on the long edge where we have our assembler here in the center, what we're going to want to do is take a splitter facing into that assembler. And again, don't forget, you don't want it going any further than the middle of the foundation. So anything from between here and here, you will get an invalid belt shape. And then next to this splitter here, we're going to take another one facing into it as well, but it's not going to be at a complete diagonal like this. We're going to have it bunch up. Bunch up. Next to it, so that way this splitter is in line with these inputs here for the short edge assemblers. Next to this splitter that is inset a little bit from the edge, we're going to take another one and we're going to have this receiving the input of our reinforced iron plates below. So we'll put that right next to it. And then here we're going to be lining up a splitter with the rods coming up and in line with this splitter here. And then from here, we're going to be putting some additional splitters over here, but at that point we'd be blocking ourselves off. So what we're going to go ahead and do is get these belted up. We'll do some tight maneuvering here. And we're definitely going to not be able to really build our way out here, unfortunately, but we'll take from that splitter, bring it over to here. This one goes to here. Make sure we connect these up. So as you can see, we definitely have some clipping going on. So now that we have that sorted out, so we have those 3 assemblers. We have one, need a belt coming out of here. Let's see if I can get it. Maybe not. Oh, because it's already built it up. Oh my word. Okay. Ignore that. Just completely ignore that. So yes, we have all these 3 assemblers all sorted out. So now we're going to be doing the belt work for these over here. So what we're going to do is from this splitter, these splitters here, we're going to be doing another one in line with that. So we're going to go ahead and take a splitter here and a splitter here. Before we get that done, let's go ahead and get this plugged in. And I don't think it can really be helped. Get this in place. Actually, I think we'll be okay. Do that. Over to there. This one to here. And then we have this connecting to here and that connecting to there. I know this is really crazy. What I'm going to go ahead and do is after we get this all belted up, I'll go ahead and show a top-down view of what it exactly looks like with nothing obstructing it. So we have our 60 or our 15 reinforced plates coming up here and our 60 rods coming up here. Let's go ahead and just do this to get out. And actually, yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and close this off. That's how it is. And now I'm gonna go ahead and put up that screenshot here. So as you can see, there's a lot of weaving and whatnot going on. And so go ahead and just, pause it here to kind of figure out how this all needs to get sorted out. Unfortunately, being in a tight space and the fact that it has to be a tight space, so that way where there's no clearance issues with the splitters and the top layer of the sandwich, I'll just put this up here for your convenience. All right, so now moving on. We're pretty much done, as you can see here. We just need to merge all of these together for our output. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is actually just take a merger, place that here, and have it running off the side. Merger here, merging in with those there, like so. All right, now don't forget, there was a lift that we did not yet put in place. Or, I'm sorry, we did put it in place, but we did not connect the actual belt. And this is for our excess iron rods in the system. I'm going to come back down and bring this over, so that way our 60 rods now come up to our top floor to where the modular frames are being made. We can now close this up. And that is effectively build complete. So I'm going to go ahead and put some walls on the outside, get these all connected up with some power, and call it a day. Alright, that'll wrap up our guide. I know the belting got a little crazy here and there, and I hope I presented it to you in a fashion that was easy to follow and understand. If you have any feedback on how I can potentially do that better in the future, leave a comment below. But beyond that, I hope you found some value in the guide. If you did, feel free to leave a like. If you want to see more content in the future, be sure to subscribe. And if you have any questions or if there's something you want to see specifically in the future, leave a comment below and I'll see what I can do. But with that, thank you for watching. Take care.